get the conversation started. Um, there are three types of questions, is what I've told every political candidate
Mm.
that I've ever worked for. And you'll only ever get three types of questions. There are I know questions, there are I think questions,
Mhm.
and there are I feel questions. And all bad answers are a result of a misalignment between answer and question by category.
Mm.
So, for example, if you ask somebody how they feel about the economy and they start quoting statistics back
Yeah.
to you, like, I know this is a good economy because the Dow Jones is X, wrong answer, because that question was an I feel question. So, I want to go through these in this way as we talk tonight, not necessarily in a specific order, but I want to talk about things that you know,
Mm.
things that you think, and things that you feel. Because I think anybody who is getting on and joining us um, has a range of feeling and emotions about this moment that range from fear,
Mm.
which I think is a very deliberate provocation. That is, if you feel that way, Trump has achieved a result and he's happy about that result, which is not to say that the fear isn't real
Yeah. A
and
reasonable
isn't
response.
deserved, right?
Mm.
Or anxiety, and that the full range of emotion, despair, hopelessness, anger, rage, whatever it may be. I want to talk a little bit
Mm.
about that tonight. See some people saying mad as hell. Um, we are in a year that we'll talk about tonight of anniversary. Really right upon some big ones. The 250th anniversary of the shot heard around the world in Lexington and Concord on the Green. A few days after that, 250 years ago, George Washington takes command of a continental army. A few days after that, a Congress forms an institution, the United States Army. United States Navy is formed later this year, the United States Marine Corps. All of these things, 250 years old this year. So the country, in its long history, has had dark chapters, had many crazy times. In this hour, when we are at the beginning of something that's pixelating, coming into focus,
Mm.
different people perceive it in different shapes and forms and worry. I was out last night. There did not seem to be general panic in the streets, but I heard a lot of tables in political discussions
Mm.
walking by. A lot of people on the streets. Elon Musk's stock is tanking. The economy is tanking. The Democratic Party in Washington is involved right now in a set of negotiations that will determine whether they exert any leverage at all to stop Elon Musk,
Mm.
which I think is the most important thing. I want to talk about that tonight. But as we now are over 1,000 people, which I think is enough to get in to the first question as we start to grow. How
Yeah.
how do you feel right now
Yeah.
in this moment?
I think like a lot of people who are already saying, I'm feeling really angry. I'm feeling, uh, some days, the dread that I'm feeling, and the dread because it's, day after day after day, right? The rising sort of flood of attacks on institutions and values and principles, everything that we thought that the country was defined by and for. And here you have people who are abusing their power and exploiting their access to the levers of power to dismantle institutions, not only in the U.S. but international institutions that have been built to create security and stability over the last 80 years and more, and hallowed, hallowed sacred principles like freedom of speech and so forth that are under attack in so many different ways. And I think, like a lot of people, I'm quite challenged right now to maintain this is my thing, to maintain enough emotional discipline so that I can engage what's happening, that I can understand it, that I can confront it, and at the same time understand it and confront it clearly, and then to be able to articulate in some useful way what's happening, so that I don't do what exactly as you suggested that Trump and the regime is after, which is to overwhelm us in such a way that we feel nothing but powerlessness and fear and worse, despair, which means that you start to give up. So the truth is there are, again, I think like everyone here, there are better days and there are worse days where I feel more overwhelmed or less overwhelmed. But I'm in some ways, and I've said this to you before, Steve. I feel honestly like I'm made for this moment, and by that I mean I'm not I am not interested in any sense giving up the fight, and I'm interested in going straight ahead, which means, in some sense, the rising bounty of abuse that's happening, in some ways only girds me for my belief that we have to do something about this, and I think that's part of what we absolutely do need to talk about tonight.
When you think about doing something, what is the first thing that you think needs to be done? And where do you think that thing will come from?
Mm.
That spark.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, for myself, I mean, I'll start there, and I think it relates to everyone else. There is the need to speak out. There is a need to assert right from wrong, true from false, normal from insane. I mean, that needs to happen because part of the effort that's going on is to degrade people's capacity to know what's true and false and what's right and wrong, to get people accustomed to oligarchic rule and kleptocracy and the kind of brutality against our fellow citizens. The more that gets normalized, the more that positions them for success. So I think part of the effort is to speak out about what you know to be true. That's the first thing. But I think that increasingly the question is going to be, what is the moment? What is the catalyst? What are the set of events that are finally going to motivate, a lot of the anger and frustration that people are feeling, where they finally say, you know what, we're going to take to the streets, right? I mean, the collective power that comes from, 3.5% of the population, according to a Harvard university researcher who talked about, in an American context, about 12 million people being in the street in some kind of coordinated way, like seeking, demanding redress. So I think we're moving toward, and I don't know what the time frame is. Is it a few months? Is it faster? Is it slower? What's the time frame for people finally saying, like, we have to use our collective power to address this. I don't think that we're there yet. I don't think, for whatever reasons, Americans have quite grasped what they should already have grasped a good long while ago, which is that we are in a crisis and we are in emergency, and we need actually leaders. And I think there's been a failure so far to articulate what the danger is and to help people to understand the scale of the danger. I think people are still somehow convinced that we're in a version of normal life, and we have Democrats who are behaving like they can still operate like they used to. That this isn't a different moment. So what is the moment that finally motivates 12 million Americans to decide they need to do something? I think it's going to be a day by day by day thing, and I think we should look at the town halls where the expression of anger at Republican representatives, the essentially the protests, the attacks that have happened at Tesla showrooms. Those are indications, and the inability. And I think I take some maybe weird optimism from Trump holding the White House for a Tesla showroom for Americans, because he revealed, if anybody didn't get it before, that the interests that he's interested in serving are the oligarchs or the billionaires or the Elon Musks of the world, and everyone else can be screwed. That's okay. So especially at this time with the economy and the stock market in trouble, where did he decide to act? Did he decide to make changes that might actually change the trajectory of the market, or did he decide to have a showroom at the White House with Elon Musk and the Tesla cars?
Extraordinary moment, of course, that image of degradation
Mm,
of all dignity at the executive mansion of the President of the United States of America, where the world's richest man, who days before calls the Polish foreign minister a little man,
yeah.
is begging for mercy because of the reaction of free people all over the world to these obscenities. And so let me say, as we have this conversation and
Mm,
our audience here tonight is joining in this early part in starting to grow as a matter of strategy. And I want to talk about history, and I want to talk about the ground on which to fight
mm,
and where to take action for everybody understand. And so there are some great heroes in the country, and among them is a Union General, Brigadier John Buford, who, in a crossroad town of Gettysburg, as the Confederate Army is approaching and the skirmishing is beginning, he rides into town on this first day, and he sees that there will be a battle, and he understands what ground he has to occupy
mm,
around Gettysburg, which is the high ground. In this decision of where to fight, to realize where the fight is, and the advantage of the high ground is going to set in motion a chain of events that has profound implications for the survival of the United States. Now, the second thing I want to talk about in this fight is for everybody to understand who's worried and has despair, really at some of the lowest moments in the country's history, when the Union Army did not win a fight for 2 years
mm,
against the Confederate Army, when there were riots in New York City and people were demanding a compromise, a surrender, a negotiated settlement in the Civil War. In 1940, and we're going to talk about tough political decisions tonight. 1940, Adolf Hitler was a colossus all over the world. The United States was not involved in the war, was neutral, believed it was protected by an ocean. So we have been right in precarious situations. Now, in the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln fired a lot of generals
Mm.
because the generals believed the way to win the Civil War was to march and seize Richmond. And what Ulysses Grant understood with his friend General Sherman was the way to win the Civil War was to directly engage and destroy the Confederate Army.
Mm.
And so that is what strategy is. Some people said the way to win is to march on Richmond, and they were wrong. And there were some people who said the thing to do was to destroy the Confederate Army, and those people were right. So the strategy of the moment right now and what to do and what not to do and where it comes from is really important to recognize. There is one last piece that I want to talk about, which is something that's quintessentially American in character. And then I will make one prediction before asking you a question. I have a very good friend who is a top German political strategist and probably one of the most successful head of state political consultants in the world over
Mm.
the last 25 years. And he said something about the Germans in character.
Mm.
He said the Germans are the only people in the world who will get online to go to the revolution.
Mm. Mm.
That is not the American people.
Mm.
If you've ever been to an airport gate, when we swarm, right, as a people, unable to line up for anything, unable to be told what to do by anyone, a defiant people up and down the chain in every conceivable way, all of our protesting will be bottom up
Mm.
and close to home, and the connection points will be there, right, and will spread. And ultimately, there will need to be an American opposition organizing committee that invests a number of different groups with seats at a table to coordinate activities over the next 18 months. But I think three things will happen. There will be hundreds of thousands of people on the street starting in 3 to 4 weeks and building from there, weather dependent, as we move into the spring.
Is there an event? Is there a catalytic moment
There
that
are there
you're looking
are events everywhere
for? Yeah.
that the number of strikes and boycotts and protests are forming in very much the manner that we saw American forces form on the night of June 5th and 6th when they were scattered all over Normandy. They knew
Mm.
what to do. People are getting together. I saw one comment. Barack Obama will not run again for
Mm.
president. Barack Obama, everybody, is a figure of America's past. Barack Obama is not an answer to our future.
Yeah.
There is no magic Obama.
Yeah.
Barack Obama is silent in this moment. Barack Obama is in Canada. Excuse me, Barack Obama is in Hawaii at this moment.
Mm.
Okay? Right? It is up to all of you. Right? Every single Tesla dealership should be blockaded and
Mm.
protested and shut down in this country. The factories, the dealerships, shut them down.
Mm.
Shut them down. Okay? The Democratic Party, led by Chuck Schumer in the Senate, is not a capable fighting
Yeah.
force,
Yeah. They're
right?
still talking about how.
Your Democratic senators got to hear from you. Got to hear from you. You know, there are Republicans who say, when will George Bush speak? He will not speak. Whatever it is that he has said, he has said.
Yeah.
It
And he
is
surely
up to
didn't say anything
you.
before the
There
election.
is no former President's League.
Yeah.
There is no magic CEO. There is no set of good billionaires coming to fight for you against the bad ones. This is a fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's up to you.
Yeah.
It's up to you. And what it means is the only thing that matters, the only point of agreement that matters is the connection point of no. And so, what I want to say is, what do you think? How would you put the most forceful argument forward to what has to happen in this moment right now? Not what happens next, but what is the demand right now?
Mm,
If you're the Democrats with leverage on a government shutdown, what is it that you are demanding?
mm, It's an interesting question, and look, I mean, I do think there are stages to this. I don't think it all happens simultaneously. I think that there's the idea of a national strike as an expression of the people's power is something that we are going to get to. That demonstrates what's possible in terms of the economic power and ultimately then the political power of the millions and millions of Americans. I think in terms of demands, in terms of redress. I mean, I think there's already, and let's use the Tesla protests so far as an indication of this, that getting Elon Musk and his so-called Doge out of our government and out of our computer systems and out of our sensitive private data, all of that out of the decision making of what should be the responsibility of Congress about what monies are spent or not spent, and what programs that are congressionally determined function or don't function. I mean, that needs to end. I think it needs to end right away. It should have ended already. And then honestly, I do wonder, and I don't have an answer whether there's a scenario in which the people's pressure can lead to resignation of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. I can see us moving toward that direction, but I think when we're at the point of that kind of demand for change, because these are oligarchs and kleptocrats who are interested in stealing the resources of the country and aligning with Putin and Russia and other dictators to dismantle what's left of our democracy. And undermine our relationship with NATO and with our Western allies. I think we're at a point where they can no longer rule our democracy.
I think that I see Erin Flanagan on the comments, and
Mm,
she said one Doge, two blank. So I'm going to try to narrow this in more precisely, for our audience,
mm,
that's continuing to grow here and reading the comments. And so I want to assert what I think it is. I
okay.
think I agree with you. I think it is number one demand, immediate, absolute unconditional cessation of all Doge activities, Elon Musk's revocation of status as a special government employee, and immediate disclosure of all and any activity immediate disclosure of everything, every penetration of every system, every piece of information, everywhere at once. Doge. One. Two, Ukraine.
mm, mm.
Three, and I have a um, question that's a tough question I want to ask, which is about Social Security.
Yeah,
But I just want to look, is there anybody on this that disagrees that Doge is number one? Musk out and full disclosure.
yeah.
And I'm just looking at the comments coming on. If there's anybody who thinks there's anything more important that the Democrats should be demanding right
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That
now, right?
that includes this this right now this question about keeping the government open or not. Where there seems to be still a failure on the part of the Democrats to grasp their opportunity to demand these things, which tells us that we cannot simply rely on them to do the work for us.
Why do you think there is a lack of grasping that in this moment of leverage that Donald Trump believes with good reason that the people sitting across from
Mm,
him will not allow the government to shut down and play chicken with him, meaning, and I want everybody to understand this, if the government shuts down, it creates a situation that within the shutdown government, what stays open becomes highly discretionary in the hands of Donald Trump.
mm,
So his power over the government increases in a shutdown, but his failure running the government will become more clear and his poll numbers will collapse
yeah,
and the economy will collapse. And so a government shutdown will need to be supported by the people
mm,
who will be hurt by a government shutdown in order for Democrats to have the spine and backbone to keep it shut down until Donald Trump submits to a demand, which is Elon Musk out.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Look, I mean, you asked the question of why has there been a failure of the Democrats so far? I mean, I think there are a few people that seem to grasp the moment. I'm thinking of Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut. I'm thinking about
He's been excellent.
yeah,
Um,
J.D. Pritzker and Governor of Illinois
JB Pritzker, excellent.
has been on it. I think Jamie
Uh,
Raskin has been a
Jamie Raskin.
solid presence in this moment. But I mean, the best thing that I can say for the Democrats right now is there's a belief that you give Trump the rope to hang himself. You create the conditions for you don't create the reaction to it so that the public responds to the reaction. You let him expose his own incompetence, his own hostility to our country and our values and principles and institutions. And in so doing that, it will reveal the danger fully to people who, to this point, for ultimately inexplicable reasons, have failed to recognize
Um,
it.
a lot of people are pointing out that Bernie Sanders is drawing big crowds
Yeah,
in Republican districts. I think that that is a good thing. I think that a lot of people are mentioning Jasmine Crockett,
yeah,
who is a real voice of defiance, both in Texas, both in Washington, and deals with a lot of abuse. AOC, and
yeah,
this is important, right? I don't agree with the politics of AOC, and she doesn't agree with mine. And you know what? I don't owe her an apology, right? With all respect to a lot of people on the program tonight, because I disagree with her, right? Um, People who disagree, who can understand that disagreement is what we're fighting for,
Yeah,
right? Is what we got to bring together.
yeah,
So, right, I just saw somebody say Alexandria Ocasio Cortez is far too left. Well, she might be where I live, but she's not for her district in Bronx, which
yeah,
is one of the poorest places in the country.
yeah,
And she's made herself an effective and principled voice, and I have a lot of respect for her, right? Though I disagree with her. We have to have a broad coalition of opposition in this. And so what I think right now, when you look around in Washington, there's not a lot of sizzle right out of that leadership.
mm,
And in the absence of that leadership, right, there's a sizzling anger, right, amongst like a lot of Democrats out in the country. And I think one thing that's going to happen is that people are going to be shocked by how little money Senate and House Democrats raise at the leadership level over this first piece. I think the big donors are mad. I think the
yeah,
small donors are mad. I think everybody is mad. And so what if in a perfect world, right? If you were to go out right now, just off the top of your head, if you were to rise up in a meeting, right? And you were to say, we have to do these three things just extemporaneously as an opposition, right? What is it that we have to do? Now, some people in Washington would say, well, Trump has $800 million in the bank. So we have to build an $800 million political committee
mm,
like Trump, which is not the right thing to do. I think it's the dumb thing to do. But what do you think are the three things that you wave a wand that have to happen to get into position, right? To to make contact, maintain contact, and push this back.
yeah. Well, I mean, look, I mean, partly it's a question of time frame. I mean, there's no question that the Democrats do need to take back the House. If they have the control over the House, that's going to make a significant difference. There's three special elections coming. There's a chance to do some serious flipping there if that happens. That's in the coming months. Right now, 2026 looks like a lifetime from now. I find it very hard to actually kind of game out the movements to that place because I think there's going to be such an unfolding of events that's going to happen before that. I think that I mean, to be honest, I'm less focused on the role of putting the Democrat beyond this question of taking back the House, putting the Democrats in a position of leadership than I am really where we started, which was, what are the ways that we can begin to coordinate a public that's not dependent upon, leading Democrats to take the lead for them. That people feel throughout the country that actually they have a responsibility to take their country back. And so honestly, I think that that's really where most people need to focus their attention. And look, that in my view, the event that could happen, whether it's out of a government shutdown or this obvious attempt that an Elon Musk has, obviously backed by Trump, to cut $880 billion from Medicaid, and that on top of the ending of payments from Social Security for some amount of people for some weeks, for some period of time. I think that's gonna generate a firestorm, a hurricane of anger, and I think that may be the moment that finally sort of brings Americans together, where they say, these people were never interested in governing. They were never interested in serving the people as a whole. And that's not going to be just Democrats at that point. I think there are going to be an awful lot of people who supported Trump and who were part of the MAGA movement who may have an awakening when they realize that the basic aspects of their survival are now being stripped away. So I think that the concentration on those issues is maybe the most important thing that can happen. And then honestly, I mean, you brought up Ukraine. I know that there's a mixed view on the part of the public, which is a result of Trump devoting so much energy to trying to undermine Ukraine and Zelensky. But most Americans, and I'm looking at a poll from the recent days. Actually, it was a YouGov poll that came out yesterday, where they were asked the question, "Who do you sympathize more with? Ukraine or Russia or neither?" And well, okay, 57% said Ukraine, 3% said Russia. Right. Well, we know what the percentage would be for the president of the United States, especially after the most disgraceful, arguably the most disgraceful act of a president of the United States, arguably in the history of the country, and the ambush of our Democratic ally in the Oval Office to completely undermine not only their effort to try to maintain their independence, their sovereignty, their commitment to democracy, and their literal survival, but the recognition of how that was a direct attack on every member of the Western alliance, every democratic ally in Europe, who now is looking at the United States as an utterly unreliable partner, as an utterly unreliable source, a credible source to share intelligence, and an unreliable source to participate in the future of solving this the security of the world, and surely of the survival of the democratic alliance.
Um, the only bone I have to pick with you, it was not arguably anything. It was
Okay.
incontrovertibly the lowest moment, where we had an American president imitating Hitler in the Berghof with the Prime Minister of Austria in 1938, and it was deeply anti-Semitic.
Mm.
And I urge everybody to read Dr. Timothy Snyder's take on this on Substack, um, where he goes very deep into the subject matter.
Mm.
Um, when what I think will happen is three things. One, there will be massive street protests. Uh, Two, Trump will overreact to those protests. And three, um, there will be no safe U.S. Senate seat and no safe U.S. House seat in this country
Mm.
this year, right? And so I want to say something to everybody